Well, hey, everybody, let's get into it. It's been in my heart for a long time to start a channel that we could just talk kind of about what's going on in the world, what's going on in current events. Obviously, if you've heard me before, you know I'm a pastor, and normally I've kind of stuck to really being a teacher of the word, a teacher of the Bible. And yet, there's just so much more in my heart. And I'm absolutely riveted by some of the things that are happening in current events, some of the things that are happening specifically with the Charlie Kirk case and why that's so interesting to me. And so I wanted to start something brand new where I could just kind of talk and talk through my own thoughts on these things. And so I want to specifically go into today where we talk about a prophecy from Kim Clement that he released in 2011. I believe it applies to some of the things we're seeing unfolding right now. That being said, I could also say that probably most of my peers and the people that, I regularly do life with, my guess is that they'd have a very different take than me. Um, What's interesting to me with this case is that I've always been super interested in anything that involved like systems and corruption and understanding systems. And so that's not really a new thing for me. I mean, I got really into researching maybe like 15 years ago, all of the 9/11 stuff. And for me, that was like a huge, um, I don't know how else to say it, but it was crushing at the time. It was like to actually take on and believe for the first time that our government could be part of something, some sort of major cover up, have involvement in something that could hurt its own citizens. That was a massive like awakening, not necessarily a good one. It was like, but I believed what I was researching, and I was so far down that rabbit hole at the time, years and years, just pivoted by that story. And for those of you who don't know, before I became a pastor, I was a journalist. So I can bear down on some things and really care about some things. Uh, um, in regards to how the church and everything comes together around the political, that for me is touchy. I want the political to bend towards the church. And even in things I've been involved in for years, like I've been in the pro-life movement for years and had done this thing called Stand for Life. We were part of Bound for Life. Maybe you know about that. But I wanted to bring the church out who had never really considered what abortion is, how the Lord feels about abortion. And so we did this outreach, and I think like 2,000 people. We wanted to stand at every abortion center in Florida. And I don't remember all the numbers. I think at the time we had like 69 abortion centers in Florida. And so I wanted to call the church to say, come and stand for a couple of hours, put tape on your mouth, just so that there's no pressure on us. It's not that we're there to convince, but we are there to pray and to hear what the Lord would say about this issue. I, that's where I've kind of seen my lane, I guess. It's like I'm not for abortion. I'm for life. That being said, I want it to be overturned in the heart, to push for laws when the heart is longing. It's like, I get that. But for me, where I found my role in how politics and church and faith all kind of weave together is going after the individual heart and saying, let God convince you of his thoughts towards life, towards anything, right? So that being said, that's kind of where I've landed over all of these years. And I just, with this particular case, the Charlie Kirk case, and what I'm discovering just as I process and continue to investigate, because like so many, I don't believe the official narrative um, at all. That being said, there's a lot of feelings around how investigations are being pressed through, how we question and how that's perceived. Is that perceived as loyalty or is it perceived as betrayal? And so I want to kind of share my thoughts on what I think about how the investigation's going. I want to talk about some people who are pivotal, I think, in bringing the investigation together. And if that's not your thing, I get it. But this is, it's consuming me in part because I think there's a real story here. It's why I think we should be looking into the Charlie Kirk case. I think especially because it connects to faith, because it connects to conservative values, and because I think we're seeing a major cover up involving extreme corruption in the highest levels. So for me personally, I think it's the right thing to do. I also think it honors Charlie's legacy. Let me just say this. I really didn't follow Charlie when he was alive. I had heard of him. I had seen some clips of his. I know he was really involved in going to college campuses, doing the prove me wrong. From the clips I had always seen of him, it seemed like he was willing to be an open dialogue about our thoughts, um, even in disagreeing with honor and dignity. And so that's what I knew of him. And the more I've researched, that's basically what I've seen. And I've listened to it. I mean, I barely knew of him before. After his assassination, I have spent a lot of time listening to his ideas, who he is, what he valued. And it seems to me that what he valued was an open dialogue, was being able to talk with people that he knew he would disagree with. And I so value that. I so value it. I think it is extremely important for us, especially as people of faith, to be willing to dialogue without having the pressure to convince and convert, but to dialogue around what the Lord is doing, to dialogue around our differences. I think it's extremely important and extremely helpful without demonizing either side. I really think when I think about Charlie and who he was and what he valued, that's what I think of now. I think of a person who wasn't afraid to talk with people he knew would disagree with him, and to look into things, narratives that didn't make sense, and to not be afraid. And I want to do my part in honoring what I see in his messaging, and also do my part because I think this is really important to look into. We can't just keep going, whether it's politically or in the church, with, the show must go on when God keeps revealing and exposing what I think he wants dealt with. That's kind of my take. So I've never done this before, so I don't know if I'm going to be any good at, trying to share screens or anything, but I'm going to do my best. There had been a prophecy that I had heard last year. Now this is a guy named Clement. He was kind of known. I believe he would play piano. He would sing, and as he would begin to worship, he would begin to prophesy. And I had heard of him way back when. I know he died some years ago, but there's a prophecy that started kind of refloating around. It goes all the way back to 2011. And I remember when I heard it last year, I think I heard it in February, and I was really moved by this prophecy and had been wondering, like, God, who is this and who are you going to raise up? My personal take, and I know it won't be popular probably with most of my peers, is re-listening to this again in the last month or so. I've listened to it a couple times over the last month. I feel like this prophecy may be about Candace Owens. And I'm bringing this to you because I know for so many people who struggle with Candace and what she's investigating now with Charlie, there can be this feeling of like it's a betrayal to look into the things he was building, to look into the network that he was surrounded by. It is a betrayal to do that. After all, you're diving in and possibly tearing down the very thing Charlie had built. I think from Candace's perspective, she's saying, I don't think Charlie had any idea what was happening behind the scenes. And I think from Candace's perspective, and now she said this outright, she believes that there are some who are involved in TPUSA who are involved in what happened to Charlie. And there's a governmental cover up to take him out. That's her take. And you may or may not agree with that. Um, and I understand that. But what I'd say as someone who's listened to her, I wasn't a regular Candace listener by any means. I'd watch clips and I'd, jump in every now and then on a show. But when Charlie died, I don't even remember how I knew this, but I knew that Charlie and Candace were really good friends. And so when all of this happened, I remember I immediately wanted to see Candace and how she would process all of this. And to be honest, I haven't missed one single show since this went down. So I have listened to everything very carefully. I think she's incredibly bright, incredibly smart. Um, I think she has a way of um, teasing out stories, in part because as an investigator, you're watching the reaction as you bring out certain pieces. She says, and many people who follow her, she's playing chess. She's not playing checkers. She's trying to look at the whole board, and she's trying to get to the bottom of a story. That's where I land with her coverage. That being said, I'm not just watching clips that can be pulled out of context. I've seen a lot of clips where she's saying, this is what they're going to say, I'm saying, and those are the clips that, go viral all over the internet. But when you're watching her show, I have seen her do very good journalism. She's sussing out a story. I also felt like in those days that followed his assassination, that Candace's grief was compelling. I felt it. I cried with her. It makes me even slightly emotional now because her grief came across to me as being very real. And so, whatever my thoughts are as she's trying to go through a storyline, taking bits and pieces of what she's been told and bringing them out at the appropriate time, my take after all of these months watching her is that she is compelled. She believes she's onto a story. She believes there's something suspect going on in the narrative, and she's going to pursue it. And I value that. And I honestly believe Charlie would have valued that. So, that being said, let me try and show you this prophecy from Kim Clement. And I just want you to, especially those of you who've watched her shows, you're landing kind of where I'm landing. I want you to watch this prophecy and see what you think, because when I insert Candace into this, I just think, and even as the story has progressed over the 3 months, there's some things in this prophecy that are just absolutely phenomenal. The cartel, that connects, I think, with this Mitch piece, and the I cannot say the name of that military base, Huaracha, the Fort Huaracha, but it connects with the cartel and parts of Mitch's life. I just think there's something to this. I want to show it to you, and we're just going to insert Candace into it and maybe talk about it for a little bit. Let me see if I can do this. Okay. Let me see. Here we go. I'm going to pick it up right here, and we won't watch the whole thing, but we'll listen to a few minutes.
I see a president that shall come. And this is not to speak bad about us. There is a president who will come. And God says he will have absolutely no fear. Absolutely no fear. Will be decisive, make decisions. And then in the middle of the restoration of America, rapidly, because of a source of energy that shall come quickly, and because of medical breakthroughs, and because of agreements between nations, specifically China. God said they shall say, we never dreamed this would happen. They said that this in Japan would never happen. But God says, listen to me. As the beginning of the restoration, as it begins, there shall be a woman that shall rise up. A woman that shall be strong in faith, virtuous, beautiful in eyes, and her eyes shall be so beautiful. Her eyes shall be round and big. I have crowned her, says the Lord, as I crowned Esther. And the people shall receive her, for she shall have the oil of gladness for the pain and the mourning that is taking place. And she shall pour out the oil. Is there some oil here, please? Marty, is there some oil? She shall pour out the oil on this nation. And God says healing shall begin, and then it shall flow rapidly. Schools will be free. from potential damage and danger, shootings and murder, drug addiction. Cartels shall be afraid of a woman anointed by God, a woman set aside. And God says they will say we hated her, but now we love her. For she shall take the oil of healing and she shall pour it upon the scars of those left and those right, and of the new party that has come forth and emerged, where they shall say Christ will reign, and this we shall not implement at all socialism, where where they have said we will make history without God. No, you will not. No, you will not, says the Lord. For I chose this nation before it was founded. Before anybody came here, I chose this entire nation, all 50 states, every one of them, to send my gospel to the entire earth. Do you think I have changed my mind? Therefore, the healing that is necessary for this nation shall come at a time in the middle of the presidency. There shall be a woman that shall come. And God said there shall be oil that shall be poured upon the nation. And they shall suddenly feel the healing. And they shall say, it is well with my soul. It is well with our soul. For the soul of America has been corrupted. The soul of this nation has been corrupted with bitterness and anger. And God said, she shall say, no more bitterness, no more anger, no more division, and shall pour the oil that shall come from the Spirit of the Lord himself. If you as a nation believe it, if you want this, lift your voice and shout one more time and say yes.
Okay. I think that this is about her. It's very interesting, this prophecy. He starts the whole thing talking about, I mean, this is in 2011, long before Trump ever ran for president. But he begins by prophesying about who I believe is Trump. And he's talking about in the middle of the presidency. I mean, we're right in this marker, right? We're right in this timeline. And I don't remember what show it was. I had never put this prophecy together with Candace. I don't remember what show I was listening to of hers, but at some point she said something. I wish I could remember, but I just remember all of a sudden I remembered this prophecy. And when I re-listened to it again, I was like, oh my goodness. I mean, talking about a new party. I mean, the right is so angry at Candace right now. They're saying, you're blowing it up. We're going to lose the midterms because you're doing this investigation. And she's going, I'm not even going to vote until we can get to the bottom of what the corruption is. Like, it's craziness to just be on the same cycle over and over again. And so I remember hearing it. And the more I've listened to the prophecy, I've gone back several times, keeping her in mind, I've really begun to pray for her in that way. If anything, I don't know how involved you are in researching just this case, but take your pick. This one has just kind of become my obsession. But corruption abounds. And at some point, we need to pull back to say that this isn't it. We've got to do some sort of clean out. And I see that Candace is using this case and it is breaking apart, the very base, the MAGA base of people, the conservative base of people who are saying, no, we're fine with the show kind of going on. And Candace is going, well, I'm not. And I'm probably landing more in the I'm not. Like, I want to believe. I want to go forward. But I'm also to a point of going, I don't know how to even do that anymore without getting to the bottom of what's playing out. So I don't know. I'm presenting that to you, and it's just caused me to pray in a different way for her. I'm longing for that healing oil to come across our nation, where that division of right, left, where we begin to find each other in the midst and have a conversation. There's people on the left who are so sick of corruption, and there's people on the right who are so sick of corruption. I wonder what God's doing, in all of that, if something new is coming forth, and my prayer is it is, just even thinking about Charlie's message and how important it is to go back and listen to, he didn't know they were final words, but they were some of his final words. The last weeks before he was assassinated, the last months, listening to what he was processing, I think that's super important. And one of the reasons I do is because over the last couple of years, I've spent almost well, at least several mornings every week, just reading the upper room discourse in the Bible, which is John 13 through John 17. It's the final discourse of Jesus. He's speaking to his disciples, knowing he's going to the cross. And I just started to view those chapters saying, this conversation, this dialogue, he's summing up, every part of his mission, every part of his messaging. He's summing it up and reminding the disciples. And it's become very, very important to me, those passages, and to make sure I'm saying yes, not to my denomination, whatever that would be, not to my way of thinking, but saying yes to his final words, and yes to what he's laying out as he's going to the cross. And so I've done the same thing with Charlie. I've done the same, I'm going back and saying, these are the final things. This is what he's processing. These are the things he's valuing. I want to look at that and understand it. I think final words matter, they just do. So I want to show you this other clip, and it's by a kid. His name's Nick Fuentes. You may have heard of him. I hadn't heard of him until maybe a month after Charlie's assassination. He had been banned from YouTube, TikTok, um, X, Facebook, for a variety of reasons. Now, this is not an endorsement of Nick Fuentes, but it's very interesting how I think he's like 28. He's coming up, and the things that we've used to shut down conversation that have worked, for generations, just kind of shame somebody enough, and it shuts down the dialogue. That's not what's happening anymore, which is part of why I want to talk about this. As the church, as those who are carrying faith, if we think that we're going to be effective in this hour in any sort of way, when our tactic is to shut down a dialogue when it doesn't align to ours, that's just not going to work. The generation that's coming up is going, we're going to look at it, and we don't care necessarily if you get the nuance of what we're saying, but name calling and shaming isn't going to work anymore. I can't remember if in this clip, Nick curses. I'm almost positive he probably does, because I watched the whole 2-hour interview with Nick and Piers Morgan. But I wanted to showcase this clip almost even as a reason for saying we have got to get the nuance and engage and re-engage and keep re-engaging and talk through, because the old tactics just don't work. And I don't think they should have ever worked, but they don't work. And I'm glad for it. It's like, let's talk through it. But I want you to see this. He's 28. He's, I would call him almost maybe alt-right. Very provocative, very smart. Don't agree with most of what he's saying. I'm going to show a clip where he's talking about racism. I just need you to know, if you don't know me, I'm married to a Mexican man. I have mixed children. My daughter's about to get married. She is marrying in May to a Black man from Haiti. Like, I don't agree with Nick on any of his takes on racism, on how, but I understand there's a nuance to the conversation. I can understand the nuance. What I find fascinating is the way he responds when Piers begins to shame him for having a take that isn't popular by any means. It's very interesting. Let's watch this. Let's see if I can do that. Let's see, share screen. Just give me a second here. I think I've got it queued up. Let's go.
You've also said you don't want to live near Black people. Let's take a listen to this clip.
I'm a new generation of white person. I'm not living around Blacks. Sorry. I want white kids, and I don't want my white kids bringing home Black people to marry. It's racial for me. And call me racist. Oh, very Christian of you. I don't give a fuck.
Sorry
I mean, it
about
couldn't
that.
be zero, really, unless you want to say that's another of your jokes. But you're basically saying, yeah, I'm a racist, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
You're fine with saying you're a racist?
Totally. I think everybody's racist.
Many
I know.
people who have assumed that you're a racist will now have heard it from your own lips. That's fine.
There you go.
That's the
Sure.
point. The point of this interview is to go over the things you've said, which have led people to reach conclusions about you, and to ascertain whether those conclusions are fair and reasonable or not. That's it.
Thank
I want to
you.
play you another clip. This is where you talk about why white people are justified in being racist. Let's take a listen to this.
First, white people are every single bit justified in being racist. Every single bit justified, to the extent that that means going out of your way to avoid black people when you see them.
You stand by
Absolutely.
that?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So white people should go out of their way to avoid black people when they see them.
Absolutely. They would be wise.
Why?
Because it's a lose-lose proposition. If you're Irina Zarutska and you don't walk the other way, you get stabbed to death and you die. If you're somebody else and you walk on the subway and you stand near a black person or something, maybe it's fine. It's a lose-lose proposition. So no, I think that white people have been beaten into submission, that we're afraid to tell the truth about it. And the truth is that when you go into these major cities like New York or Chicago, I believe she was in North Carolina, there is a menace, which is young, black, adolescent men. They're extremely violent. And we have been told that we have to pretend like they are every other person. We have to be colorblind to that. And we're supposed to go and be in the midst of all this danger. And I think that at this point, it's gotten out of control. And I tell my followers, it is better to be perceived as racist or racist and walk the other way and maybe keep your life than to say, I'm a good anti-racist. I don't mind that this person's making me uncomfortable. Maybe he's looking a little froggy. I'm going to sit down because I'm a good person and get stabbed, mugged, whatever.
Okay, there's part of the clip. It almost seemed like there was a cut in that clip that wasn't there in the original. But when Piers calls him a racist, he reaches out his hand. He goes, own it, own it. And I've thought about that clip. Obviously, I don't agree. I will be fair here. Nick is talking about city violence. He lives in Chicago. So he's talking about, real crime happening all around him and then how to walk that out. And so it's not in a vacuum that this discussion is playing out. That being said, I don't agree with Nick. I don't want to think that way. I don't want to, I'm what everything he was describing, so, and I'm fine with that. I don't view the world that way. The thing that's interesting to me isn't Nick Fuentes' thoughts on racism. The thing that was interesting to me about this interview is the fact that he just did not care that he was being, called a racist. He's being publicly shamed and humiliated. He just didn't care. And I have thought about that, how for my generation growing up, I mean, you just shame somebody enough, call them names enough, and there can be a backing up. And he just was going, I'm not going to be shamed for my thoughts. This is what I think, and this is why I think it. Why is that important? Because I feel like as the church, capital C, capital C church, that as the church, if we're the ones running away from a dialogue to let the ideas be heard, I just don't see, when we're thinking about the next generation coming up, and the biggest concern I have is I want to see people rooted in the love of God, right? That's my desire. That's what I long for. That's what I think about all the time. I'm seeing it's like the landscape of how we communicate with one another really shift. Even in that interview with Piers and Nick, which I think is fascinating if you can watch it, to listen to how the generation coming up, the generation that grew up during COVID, right? They've gone through, what they know of the world is what they know of the world, and they're coming out going, we're not buying this, and we're not going to be shamed because we're not going along with groupthink. There's something fascinating about that to me, and very important when we are asking the Lord, how do we reach the people that we live near? How do we reach young people? How do we speak to grandchildren and children, and how do we get past the provocativeness of it to really hear? And I think what's required is that we open ourselves up to nuance, that we open ourselves up to trying to understand, not just trying to be understood. There's something about this to me that's very compelling, because it marks a difference. In the past, you could shame somebody enough and demonetize them and they would be gone. And what we're seeing is that's just not working anymore. I think it's important to note that and to not shrink back to it. I want to go back just to a few minutes on why this thing with Candace and Esther, it kind of lines up to me. This woman that God is raising up, she's touching the political, she's touching cartels, gang activity. When I think about who Esther is, even in the word, she's not a preacher, she's not a prophet. Her power is relational, sacrificial, and hidden. And if you don't think that Candace Owens is, she's put herself out there. She's become like public enemy number one for looking into it. And it's because so much of the political arm of the right and left, but I've been on the side of the right, so much of the political arm and the faith arm are saying, hey, show goes on. We're going forward. This is working for us. And she's just not afraid to kind of come against that. She's risking her own safety. She's definitely risking her family's safety. The story of Esther centers on a deliverance through humility. And then here's this word, and timing, right? I find that fascinating with how Candace is drawing out her story, the story, how she's doing an investigation. It's right. She's just got this podcast in her basement. She's kind of alone, she's got a team, but I'm saying she's not this huge arm of an organization. She's really just one lady going, I'm not going to stop looking into this. I find that fascinating and incredibly honoring, if I'm going to be honest. Honoring to Charlie, honoring to what she believes is not true, and honoring to what she believes is true, and that she's going to be relentless. And even with Nick, disagree with everything he said, but the value that I can honor is not being afraid to be honest, and not being afraid to push back when someone is saying, hey, you're a schmuck for believing. And he's just going, okay, then if that's where I stand with you, but this is what I think. I want to be more that way. I want to be more like, this is what I think. In part, that's why I'm doing the show. I recognize as well that most people in my friend group will probably not agree with anything that I'm sharing in this, but it's really what I think. And I think it's important that I voice that because I'm voicing it from my perspective, not out of a betrayal, but out of a loyalty. And I'm just saying, I want us to go that way. So the real question as we peer into all of this is it betrayal or loyalty to shine light on something and to look at it? And that becomes the central question, doesn't it? Which is it? What is it? Is it loyalty to look at the thing and shine light on it? Or is shining light on it and looking at it and peering in and probing a betrayal? I think if we were to be just clear and honest, how we answer that question is where we land in this whole investigation, right? For me, I'm landing that shining light, peering in, probing is honoring and right. So, we're in that. We're in this in the church over the last couple of years. There's been so many scandals, the one that's really affected me just because of who I'm connected with in ministry is the scandal that broke with IHOP and Mike Bickle, but we've got Robert Morse. There's so many scandals. And it feels like the same question there plays out in the church. It's like you've got I don't know what the percentages are, but a large portion of the church saying it's disloyal to look at this. I mean, as we look at it and as we just dissect any of this stuff publicly, it's bringing shame on the gospel. My take is that it was bringing shame on the gospel to be corrupt in the first place, to abuse people in the first place. But how we answer that question is dividing even now the church. Right. And I think both sides in their way are saying, I'm doing this in my understanding out of loyalty. The people who are going, we shouldn't look into anything, I think in their way, they're saying that's me being loyal to the system. I don't feel really any loyalty towards the system. I feel loyal to God. I feel loyal to the truth. And as the system lines up to God and the truth, I can be loyal to the system. But if it doesn't, I feel no obligation to be loyal to a system that isn't aligned to the values that I hold most dear. That's where I land. But this is the question, isn't it? So for my particular take, I feel like it is time for a clean out, time to uh I just want to believe again. I just want to believe in the things I'm part of and the people I'm part of, that I want to believe the motives are pure, and I don't know that I do anymore. And so I'm willing to look at it, and that's why I'm bringing it up to you. So when I think about, Candace not just Candace, but investigative reporting and journalists, when I think about what the press is supposed to be, the press, and not that I think Candace calls herself or thinks of herself, or these investigative journalists with Ian Carroll or Baron Coleman, I don't think they think of themselves as the press. They're, individual journalists, independent journalists. But journalism in general is supposed to be committed to finding the truth. And the press, that principle is supposed to carry over to the press. It becomes the checks and balances of our system. It's why we need a free press. And I think if you're down the rabbit hole of who owns what, I don't know that we have that anymore, which is why I very much value independent journalists, and I value digging into it. So we need the checks and balances of people who are committed to not one side, not the other, right? But committed to telling the truth, committed to getting to the bottom of something. So that's where I land. I'm all for open dialogue and coming to the light. I had this thing recently happen where somebody came and accused me, and it was just so out of left field for me, to be honest. And you're questioning yourself, you're going back, I'm calling other leaders who were part of it, who would have been there, and in a way witnesses to the whole that whole time frame. And what I'd say even about that is, when all this came forward just last week for me, I immediately got on the phone. There were people named, and I got on the phone with the people who I could, and just tried to get to the bottom of what was being said. And what happened in this particular case was that then when I was trying to get on a call, let's get on a call and talk it through. The people you're naming, put them on a call and let's talk it through. You can all gang up and let's talk it through. And the response to that was, no, we're not going to get on a call. Well, okay. There's no reconciliation without talking things through. What I'd say about that is that, generally speaking, when someone is calling for, let's get it, the whole thing into the light, let's bring all of the dialogue into the light, let's stop all of the little circles and just talk it through. I almost always am going to put my trust in the person calling for light and calling for transparency. And whether that's happening in the church, whether that's happening in the stories that we're covering, it's incredibly important to me that we look at who's going, let's just talk it all out. I've got nothing to hide here. Let's talk this through. I feel reluctant when that's not what's happening. That's when I start to doubt and probably pull back. And whatever it looks like, whether it's in my personal life, whether it's playing out in the church, and whether it's playing out in politics, who wants the light and who doesn't. And we could get into the Epstein file. We can get anybody who's saying, no, let's cover it up. I am no longer on the side of that person, right? I'm just no longer on that side, especially with politicians who run on transparency or bringing truth to something. And then they're the ones, or their staff, their people are saying, no, we want to shut it down. I just can't trust that anymore. I don't trust it anymore. So that's where I'm landing. I want to play you one other clip. And and just look, because I'm kind of wondering if, I mean, I don't know, this is a brand new channel. I think there's like 20 of you on here. I don't know how many of you are involved in this case, but this is really pivotal. There's a guy, his name, I forget, I'll pull it up in a minute. But his whole thing, he's an accountant, and he's been diving in, investigating TPUSA from the financial place and looking into why this matters. And there's a lot of financial issues that have just not lined up, incredibly suspicious, troubling. And when we start thinking about motives for why there would be any kind of cover up, whether people from TPUSA were involved in this assassination with Charlie Kirk, there's some things that are really important to look at. You want to look at who's got motive to be part of anything. You know, Charlie, I think days before he was killed, he had sent out like an all staff email talking about replacing the COO and doing a Doge style report. Well, that had never before happened. I think he was onto something. I think he couldn't figure out where the money was coming in and where it was going out. And I think he knew something was up. And if you think that somebody being caught from an organization of fraudulently moving or pocketing millions of dollars isn't motive to be involved, I think you're wrong on that. And so I want to play you this accountant, some of his research. He's phenomenal to listen to. Let me see if I can play this clip. Give me a second. I think it's this one. Yep. Okay, I'm going to start it here. Just something maybe you haven't heard before if you're not following the story. It's important.
Which one is it? I want to go back in time to 2017. A company was created called We the People USA, Inc. This was a nonprofit corporation formed in Arizona. This company is important because when you understand what people have done in the past, it becomes a template for what they're likely to do in the future. This company was created with 5 directors: Mike Miller, Doug DeGroot, Jake Hoffman, Dwayne Farnsworth, and Tyler Boyer.
Tyler Boyer is the COO.
DeGroot are both current board members of Turning Point USA. That is why they are on there. I've already explained who Jake Hoffman and Tyler Boyer are. I find Dwayne Farnsworth very strange. He is a bankruptcy attorney in Mesa, Arizona. Why is this random bankruptcy attorney a director in this company with Jake Hoffman and Tyler Boyer? It seems unusual. Well, you might have noticed that he has the same last name as the IT guy, Terrell Farnsworth, who was present at Charlie Kirk's murder. Now, I don't know if these two people are related. Maybe you internet sleuths at home can figure that out. But a lot of people have questions about the IT guy, Terrell Farnsworth. Like, why did he move the chair at the crime scene to remove the SD cards with the footage of the murder? Why did he film a selfie video of himself directly after the shooting?
He's dead. God help him.
I find this extremely strange. Who witnesses a shooting and immediately thinks to themselves, I want to film a selfie video of myself? I think that's odd. So a lot of people have been questioning why this IT guy acted so strangely. Well, I can give you one possibility. If his relative was involved in shady business dealings on the side with Tyler Boyer, that could explain it. But again, I don't know if they're related or not. The main point is to show that Tyler Boyer and Jake Hoffman have a history of doing these side businesses together. We have the paperwork. This company was formed in 2017, and then it was dissolved in 2021. That is strange because 110 LLC was created in 2021. Here is the formation paperwork signed by Jake Hoffman. I do not know why he lied about this in his post on X.com and said it was a decade-old company. This was formed 4 years ago. It was formed at this address in Delaware next to several other buildings Candace Owens has identified in her podcast.
I'm going to stop it there because I can't remember how far he has to get into it, but he's he's showing there's these basic shell companies that have been formed, and they are the beneficiary of these payouts coming out of TPUSA, millions of dollars unaccounted for. It's that company he's talking about, that shell company, is registered as a marketing company, but it doesn't exist. I mean, it's not indexed on Google. The website hasn't changed in years. It looks to be suspicious, beyond suspicious, and that suspicion casts motive on why, when Charlie is saying and announcing, I'm about to do a Doge style reporting on our entire company, like, days later, he's gone. It matters, and we should be looking at it. It really does. There's a guy, Baron Coleman, who I found through listening to, I think, Ian Carroll, and he does real long shows, like 3 hours, but he's just honed in on this investigation. And one of the things he said the other day that really, I've been thinking about, he was talking about Andrew Colvett, which I believe he's the press. He does something. I mean, he's high up in TPUSA. I think his official role, though, is their forward messaging going out. And he believes Andrew's involved, and he's saying, he's calling for Andrew, like, repent, turn around, you're going to forfeit your soul. I mean, and he was talking the other night about how he's been praying for Andrew and praying and just believing that he was going to come clean about some of these things that were happening within the organization, and why there's light being shined on the organization right now. And I came away thinking, I don't know that I've really spent any time praying for these people, but I want to, and I will. And I think it's incredibly important, especially because this is interwoven with faith. It's interwoven with the gospel. It's important that we get to the bottom of it. And it's important that we don't shrink away, in my opinion, from just saying we're fine with any kind of corruption. I'm not fine with any kind of corruption. I want the church to be the church. I want the real thing. I want the real thing. I don't want a pep rally for something that in the interior workings, it's just complete corruption. So I don't know. I've just come away from all of that. That being said, way more into maybe my brand, so to speak, is I've been reading John 13 and thinking a lot about betrayal, connected to this case, connected even to my own heart. John 13 says something that I think is really astounding. The passage starts. Let me just read you the passage. Now, this is the passage, if you haven't read it or haven't read it in a while, where Jesus is washing his disciples' feet. And it's in this chapter that we know that Judas is about to betray the Lord, about to betray Jesus. And at the end of the chapter, the end of John 13, we've got Peter saying, I'll go with you to the end. I'll die with you till the end. And Jesus says to him, no, you're actually going to deny me 3 times. I mean, there's 2 betrayals marked in this chapter. Yes, Judas's betrayal, but also Peter's betrayal. We see 2 different outcomes to those betrayals. We can all betray, Our hearts betray, our words betray, our actions betray the Lord, betray one another, right? And so God can restore us in our accusations, the heart accusations that we have towards him. He can restore the areas of betrayal that we have in our life. That's what we see later on in his love. Yeah, I can't tell if it's still going. It looks like it's going, but my camera's not picking up. So we'll see what it's doing. I can't tell. I can't tell. It's picking up. There we are. There was a little break in there. Sorry about that. The first part of John 13 says this. Now, before the feast of Passover, when Jesus knew that his hour had come to depart out of this world to the Father, having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. And I just love that. You know, it's our betrayals, our weakness, our failures, they're there. But the chapter begins with this incredible line: having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. Our betrayals are marked with Jesus's commitment. And I want us and the church to reflect more and more of Jesus and less betrayal, less and less corruption. So I just want to kind of get us to think and get us to embrace the dialogue again. And that's kind of what I'm doing. I expect, dialogue will come in my world from this, and there will be disagreements and different perspectives. And I welcome that. Like, I think we should welcome that. So I just want to end with this one thing. I've been reading this book called, it's going to be backwards for you. Oh, no, it's not. Love Poems from God. And it's just I don't know, 12 or so people in here. And this is by Meister Eckhart. And I read it this morning and I just loved it. And I want to end with good news. Always good news. The gospel's nothing but good news. But this was written hundreds of years ago. And this is what it says. But he wanted me is the name of the title. But he wanted me. I could not bear to touch God with my own hand when he came within my reach. But he wanted me to hold him. How God solved my blessed agony, who can understand? He turned my body into his. The goal of the gospel isn't behavioral modification, right? It's a transfigured life where we begin to relate to the one who lives within us. And like Paul, it's no longer I who live. I become your witness. I become your witness. I'm saying what I hear you say. I'm doing what I see you do. This is the goal of the gospel, transfigured life. And there's no show that needs to go on for that. It's not about the show. It's about the one who loves us and the one who restores us. And so I just want to remind you, as we look at things, and I don't know, I'm just kind of going for it today, but as we look at things and as we ponder things, that we wouldn't forget, it's not the goal of God isn't systems. It's renewal. It's real renewal and transformation. That's what he's after in all of our hearts. So I want to pray for Andrew and Tyler, Candace, Erica, we lift this to you, God, but we ask you for the truth, and we ask you for the light, and we pray that over our nation. God, we pray over our nation that your goodness would come. I agree with that word that Kim released in 2011, that God, your healing balm for our nation would come, and that you would restore us, and that you would restore our hearts. And God, my hope for systems isn't in systems, but it is in a transfigured life, that as we operate in the world, that God, we would be your witnesses, and we would be your ambassadors, God. As if God himself were making his appeal through us. You are reconciled, and so be reconciled. This is my prayer. It's my prayer for my own heart, my prayer for you, my prayer for the nation. And that's it. Love you. Thanks for listening. Welcome your feedback.